Umibozu is a race of intelligent marine amphibians living in the Pacific Ocean. Their skin is smooth and feels like the skin of newts and axolotls. The bodies of Umibozu are completely black, except for the small fins on the arms and legs, which are blue in color. In their external structure, these creatures somewhat resemble humans. But compared to humans, Umibozu has a much more elongated, lean body with long arms and legs ending in 3 fingers. However, there are some exceptions, which will be discussed later. Representatives of this race have a height of about 45 meters and a weight of up to 100 tons. Their heads are large and convex, and their oval green eyes take up most of their faces. Females have a much more slender build and smaller heads than males, as well as a different shape of their fins, although this is where their differences end. Umibozu communicate in a low, raspy voice, for which they have a barely noticeable mouth, but they breathe through their gills and use them to obtain food. When an Umibozu is hungry, it sits on the bottom in a lotus position and uses its gills to filter the water, which contains plankton and krill, its main food. As the Umibozu consumes its food, it makes a barely audible rattling sound and releases bubbles from its gills. These creatures live in the so-called deep ocean, an area of the ocean that begins at a depth of about 200 meters and extends to the most remote and dark corners of the planet. In these areas, the conditions are extreme. At depths of more than a kilometer, the pressure becomes immense, exceeding 100 atmospheres. The water temperature is close to zero, and sunlight does not reach these regions. The physiology of the Umibozu is well adapted to such extreme conditions. They have excellent eyesight, hearing, and sense of smell, which helps them to survive without any problems in absolute darkness. At the same time, the Umibozu itself is very difficult to detect, as it has no smell, which is possible due to a special slime that covers its entire body, and this slime acts as a lubricant, allowing these creatures to move through the water almost silently. The only sound that can be heard is the splashing of water when the Umibozu gets close to its opponent. These creatures are excellent swimmers, capable of moving underwater at great speed. Their swimming style resembles that of frogs, with the creature combining powerful movements of its hind legs and coordinated movements of its front limbs. At the same time, Umibozu are extremely strong physically, and despite their not-so-threatening appearance, they are excellent fighters with strength comparable to that of giant krakens and leviathans. This, combined with their agility and thick skin that can withstand numerous injuries, makes them some of the most dangerous creatures in the ocean. However, in addition to this, Umibozu have 2 abilities that set them apart from other underwater races. The first is memory protection. If an Umibozu intends to make a creature it encounters forget about it, it will concentrate a bright, glowing substance in its eyes, causing them to emit a sunny yellow light. If a creature looks into this light, it will instantly lose consciousness for 1 minute, and upon waking, it will have no memories of the Umibozu or any events associated with it.
Sorry.
This is a defensive technique that Umibozu uses exclusively for nonviolent purposes, usually to quickly retreat before the victim wakes up. But, if anyone who has already forgotten encounter with Umibozu looked at them again, they will remember all the previous encounters. And it doesn't matter how exactly the victim encounters the creature again. In person, in a picture, or as a statue. The second ability of Umibozu is mind reading. To do this, he must grab the creature he is interested in by the head, and then, thanks to the weak magnetic field on his palms, he can enter the victim's neural connections and view their memories. However, there is a limitation, as Umibozu cannot view all of the victim's memories from their entire life. He can only access the last 2 days of their life. Additionally, if the victim forgets something, Umibozu will not be able to view the forgotten memory. These 2 abilities, which are related to changing the cognitive perception of other beings, are a great mystery of this race, as no scientist in the underwater world knows exactly how or why the Umibozu acquired these abilities, and the intelligent amphibians themselves are reluctant to share their secrets. The most they can say when asked about this is that they were granted these abilities by the spirits of the ocean thousands of years ago, which doesn't tell us much. But it is not possible to ask them about it in more detail, as the Umibozu are a very, very closed community that does not trust outsiders. They live in the western Pacific Ocean, in an area called the Devil's Sea, but for the inhabitants of the underwater world, this area of the sea is known as the Umibozu domain. Umibozu are social creatures that live in large groups of several thousand individuals. They do not have a permanent residence, as the Umibozu migrate from one place to another most of the time, stopping only to rest and forage for food. The leader of the Umibozu community holds the title of monk and has unquestioned authority. The title of monk is not earned through merit, but rather through birth, and is determined by the number of fingers on the hands. For unknown reasons, some individuals of this species may occasionally have a birth defect where they have 4 fingers instead of 3. In the Umibozu culture, having more than 3 fingers is considered an honor, and individuals with this feature gain greater power and influence in their society. The Umibozu do not have a centralized state, and each community is autonomous and governed by its own monk. However, in times of crisis, all the clans gather at a great assembly, where they work together to decide what to do. The Council of 10 Monks plays a crucial role in the Great Assembly, as it is an advisory body made up of the wisest leaders from each community. Once a monk is elected to this council, they remain a member for the rest of their life. However, there is a title that is the highest in the hierarchy of the Umibozu, the Supreme Leader. This title can only be held by someone who was born with 5 fingers. As a symbol of power, the Supreme Leader carries an obsidian spear. The holder of this title has complete authority over all members of their species, from monks to commoners. Their word is law, and no one dares to disobey them. Umibozu live by the code, an unwritten set of laws that every member of the species knows by heart. The code is a philosophy of behavior that defines both individual and social behavior in the community. The code dictates that everyone, even one's mortal enemy, should be respected, that assistance, protection, and patronage should be provided to one's fellow in extreme situations, that one should honor their elders, remember their ancestors, obey the will of the Supreme Leader, respond with kindness to kindness and with malice to malice, and that one should selflessly protect their family. Speaking of family, Umibozu have an unusual marriage tradition, as they do not have a traditional wedding ceremony or celebration. Instead, the male and female simply verbally express their love and desire to be together, and the union is considered complete. The female's pregnancy lasts for 13 months, after which she lays a 1 caviar the size of a basketball, which hatches into a tadpole after another 3 months. At the age of 1 year, the tadpole develops legs, at 3 years, it develops arms, and at 5 years, it loses its tail and becomes a fully formed Umibozu. The parents will care for the baby until it reaches adulthood at the age of 16, after which it will leave the family to start its own. Umibozu have a lifespan of about 100 years. After death, the relatives dig a deep grave at the bottom, where they bury the shrunken body. However, the Umibozu believe that if the deceased has followed the code throughout their life, their soul will be sent to the realm of the dead forever. At the same time, according to their belief, the afterlife is not an abstract concept, but a specific place with an entrance. According opinion to the Umibozu, this entrance is the Well of the Seas. From time to time, friends and family of the deceased will make a pilgrimage to the Well of the Seas to throw a gift inside or communicate with the deceased through ritual meditation. Umibozu is an ancient race that appeared in the western Pacific Ocean about 300,000 years ago. Underwater scientists believe that their ancestor was a type of ancient amphibian that migrated to the ocean. By the way, these same amphibians are the ancestors of the sea dog, so yes, Nessie is a distant relative of Umibozu. But, as you might guess, the Umibozu themselves do not consider this version to be true. According to their legend, the ancient gods created them around the same time they created life on the planet. The exact number is not mentioned, but it is approximately several million years ago. In any case, both the Umibozu philosophers and the underwater scientists who study their history agree that the Umibozu were a primitive and poorly organized race in their early development, but around 100,000 years ago, they learned to process polymetal, creating cities and tools, and developed a language, culture, and philosophy. Around the same time, the Umibozu developed their code and formed their current social system, where social status is determined by the number of fingers. At the same time, they had their first supreme leader, whose name has been lost in the annals of history, but what is known for certain is that the first supreme leader created the obsidian spear, which was kept by a council of 10 monks after his death until a new 5-fingered Umibozu was born. For many millennia, the Umibozu's domain expanded under the leadership of various supreme leaders, engaging in direct confrontations with sea serpents to expand their territories. Around 500 BC, the Umibozu began to openly interact with humans. In general, the Umibozu themselves consider this time to be a golden age for their species, but the problem with all golden ages is that they don't last forever, and they are always followed by dark times, which the Umibozu were also unable to avoid. It all started when the Krakens arrived in the Pacific Ocean in the 10th century. At first, the Umibozu did not know what these creatures were, and they were curious about them, but their attitude quickly changed when the first queen of the Pacific Ocean, Kara, began building a new underwater city of Krakens in a sacred area for the Umibozu, and she also forbade them from approaching the Well of the Seas. Moreover, she demanded that the Umibozu stop interacting with humans and recognize the Kraken's authority over the entire Pacific Ocean. Naturally, the Umibozu were not pleased with this, and Supreme Leader Yoshihiro demanded that Krakens leave the Pacific Ocean. The Queen Kara responded by declaring war. Thus began the first war between the Krakens and the Umibozu, which lasted for 10 years. Almost nothing is known about it, as the Umibozu regularly used their amnesiac ability, causing many witnesses to forget what happened and be unable to describe its full extent. The war culminated in a battle near Midway Atoll, in which Queen Kara fought Supreme Leader Yoshihiro, resulting in the latter's death. However, Kara and all the Krakens involved in the battle, including her daughter, were afflicted with amnesia and forgot everything they knew about the Umibozu. All they had left was the obsidian spear, whose ownership neither the queen nor anyone else could recall. The Supreme Leader's body was carried from the battlefield and buried on the seabed, after which the Council of 10 Monks decided to completely change their survival strategy. It was concluded that since they had been defeated, they could not allow their enemies to take advantage of what they had. So the Umibozu decided to destroy all of their cities and works of art, and begin to lead a secretive nomadic lifestyle so that not only the Krakens, but also other races would not know of their existence. They believed they had to hide from the world until a new supreme leader was born, someone who could reclaim the obsidian spear and lead the Umibozu people to battle the Krakens and drive the invaders from the Pacific Ocean forever. Until then, they were forbidden from taking any action against them. The Umibozu called this period retreat into the shadows, and it lasted 1,000 years. Throughout all this time, the Umibozu lived in isolation, and no one knew that they existed, as they erased the memories of anyone who encountered them. The only exception were the deep-sea mermaids, as they were the only creatures that were not affected by the amnesia effect. However, these creatures were very secretive themselves, and as a result, the rest of the world was unable to learn any information from them, and what little information was available was dismissed as mere fairy tales. But everything changed in the middle of the 20th century, when a 5-fingered Umibozu named Kyuseishi was born. Many members of his species, who feared that this day would never come, were excited by the arrival of a new supreme leader who would free them from the burden of their secret existence. However, before he could do so, he needed to retrieve the obsidian spear, which had been kept in the city of the Kraken Kingdom since the time of Queen Kara. Kyuseishi could not openly enter the Kraken city to steal the spear, so he devised a plan. He intentionally sank a fishing trawler, which caught the attention of Princess Agatha and her sister Jean, who were determined to find the person responsible. They decided to split up, and Kyuseishi dealt with them separately. First, he beat Jean to a pulp. Then he defeated Agatha, and under the threat of killing her sister, he ordered her to go home and, in secret from her mother, the Queen of the Pacific Ocean, Cydia, steal an obsidian spear for him. Agatha agreed, and after she delivered Kyuseishi's spear, he erased both sisters' memories of him. However, Kyuseishi was in no hurry to reveal his race to the world, as he remembered the mistakes of the past and understood that he could not defeat the Krakens alone. To do this, Umbuzu needed allies, and he found an ally in the form of the mermaid princess Nerissa, whose mother had been overthrown by her aunt Kali, forcing Nerissa to go into exile on land. However, the princess wanted to avenge her mother and regain her throne, but she needed an ally to do so. Thus, Kyuseishi and Nerissa made a deal. The Umibozu would help overthrow Queen Kali, and in return, after taking power in the Mermaid Kingdom, Nerissa and the Umibozu would join forces in a war against the Krakens, whom Nerissa herself hated for helping Kali overthrow her mother. The Umibozu began to attack the mermaid cities, erasing their memories so that they would not remember who had done it, which put Queen Kali in a difficult position, as she was unable to deal with the crisis, and the exiled Princess Nerissa gained more supporters in the kingdom, allowing her to stage an internal coup and overthrow her aunt, becoming the new queen of the mermaids. At the same time, Princess Agatha conducted her own investigation, during which she learned from the deep-sea mermaids about the existence of the Umibozu and their ability to erase memories. However, it was already too late. Upon her return, Queen Nerissa discovered the trident of the Oceanus, which sparked the Trident War, where the Umibozu sided with the mermaids, finally revealing their existence to the world for the first time in 1,000 years. The Umibozu were very useful to the anti-Kraken coalition, as their abilities often changed the course of the war in their favor, but they were also physically very strong, capable of easily defeating an entire corps of ordinary Kraken warriors or fighting giant Kraken on equal terms. Kyuseishi himself personally killed 12 giant Kraken, and he was second only to Queen Nerissa in terms of the number of giant Kraken he defeated. However, in the Taurus Strait, he was tracked down by the Queen of the Pacific Krakens, Cydia, and during the battle between them, she was wounded by an obsidian spear, but despite this, she emerged victorious and killed the supreme leader of the Umibozu. Meanwhile, in another part of the ocean, an equally significant battle for the trident took place, resulting in Princess Agatha capturing the trident of the Oceanus. After that, the Council of 10 Monks made the bitter decision to make peace with the Krakens, which eventually happened. Cydia returned the obsidian spear to them and recognized the Umibozu's rights to the Sea of the Devil, and in return, the Umibozu agreed not to engage in war with the Kingdom of the Krakens or support their enemies. Cydia also allowed Umibozu to make an open pilgrimage to the Well of the Seas. Despite their efforts, Umibozu's dream of driving the Krakens out of the Pacific Ocean was not realized, but it can be argued that they got off easy, especially considering what happened to the mermaids after the Trident War. At the moment, the Umibozu are a very closed society that does not seek to establish diplomatic relations with other races. The only exceptions are their immediate neighbors. The Umibozu have maintained a warm relationship with the mermaids, even though they promised not to help the Kraken's enemies under the treaty with Cydia. However, the personal relationship between these two species remains friendly. The Umibozu have a very poor relationship with the sea serpents, even though they fought on the same side in the War of the Trident. The old enmity has forever sown a seed of distrust between them. The attitude towards the Krakens is very, very hostile. Although a peace treaty was signed between the Umbadzu domain and the Kraken kingdom on a political level, relations between the two races are still very strained. Umibozu are indifferent to humans, and they stopped interacting with them over 1,000 years ago, so they see no reason to start doing so again, even though Umibozu are considered evil spirits in human culture who sink ships and kill sailors. So, after all of the above, we can conclude that the Umibozu are a race that, by all accounts, could have not only become the dominant force in their home Pacific Ocean, but also, in principle, rule over all the 7 seas, and they had every chance of doing so. The Umibozu, especially before their retreat into the shadows, were a monolithic society with a unified government, and they had the strength and abilities to become serious competitors to the Krakens. However, they were unable to take advantage of this, and the reason for this is the structure of society, in which power is not given to the most intelligent or capable individuals, but to those with more fingers on their hands. This makes the Umibozu's system of government very inefficient, slow-moving, and prone to crises in the event of leadership death, as if the supreme leader dies, their successor does not take their place, as is the case with a monarchical system, and the people do not elect new leaders, as is the case with a democratic system, but instead, they must wait and hope that a new Umibozu with a unique mutation will be born. Because of this, the government of the Umbadzu domain often made strange and even irrational decisions, such as when they decided to destroy their own civilization in order to wait for a new leader to be born. This system was self-destructive, and it was the reason why this strong, wise, and unique race with their own culture and philosophy were unable to succeed.